Welcome to the God's Good Table podcast, where you can learn all about nutrition, healthy eating and lifestyles, non-toxic healing modalities, and what the Bible has to say about all of this. So if you're interested in any of these topics, stay tuned. But I also want to tell you about an exciting event we have coming up August 12th through 14th. God's Good Table will be at Polyface Farm near Stanton, Virginia for an exciting, encouraging, information and action-packed few days, including a bonus Sunday morning worship and fellowship time featuring Preacher Joel. You'll hear from speakers including Sally Fallon Morell, Chef Jamie Berry, Mike the Fit Farmer Dixon, Pork Rind the Pork Evangelist, Joel Salatin, of course, and myself, Maureen Diaz. Our topics include the nutritional importance of animal foods, what the Bible has to say about this, how to select and prepare these foods, and tips to get your family to eat nose to tail. The Polyface crew will be feeding us breakfast and lunch both Friday and Saturday, while we also have a special VIP dinner planned for Saturday evening. The God's Good Table crew will provide a nourishing breakfast on Sunday morning before our worship service as well. Early bird pricing ends July 13th, so go to godsgoodtable.com now to register. See you there. I am really excited today to welcome Joel Salatin to our podcast. If you've watched our YouTube channel at all, you've probably seen the interview that I did a year ago now with Joel and Rory Feek. And that's one that a lot of people have really liked, and the message resonated with many around the world. As the message does, Joel, you can speak to that all around the world as you travel. You're hearing the same kinds of things, I'm sure. But I wanted to talk today a little bit deeper about the church and Christianity and food and health and just how we became so off track. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I'm going to introduce to those of you who have not already read the book, The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, which was the book that really told me that Joel and I were definitely on the same page, which I already knew. Joel, I've known you for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I don't know. And yeah, we've done a lot of things together. But when I picked up that book and started to read it, I remember it was just almost like an epiphany. Wow, you put into words exactly what I have been feeling for so long. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of that book?
Sure. You want me to show the book here?
Absolutely.
I'll just show it right here. That's me there on the cover. The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, respecting and caring for all God's creation. It's my basic working thesis on it was I called this my coming out book. And it was a long time in coming. And I wanted to wait until I don't know, I had enough credibility, within the whole, movement to be able to address this issue, because it's a divisive issue. It's a tough issue. And the basic thesis of the book is that all of physical creation is an object lesson of spiritual truth. It's very, very simple. So, many of us who've done kids' church, object lessons go way, way back, right? You bring a nail and you talk, hammering and holding things together and blah, blah, blah. You bring in a certain kind of plant and you talk about characteristics it has. And it's all about, to move into spiritual truth. And so if we assume that all of physical creation is an object lesson of spiritual truth, then, and number two, that God owns it all and we're just stewards of it, then suddenly the question is, well, it's all God's stuff. So I wonder what he wants me to do with it. And the question, does God care? Does God care if I drink 4 Mountain Dews a day? Does God care if I go to McDonald's? Does God care if I grow a garden? Does God care? And the problem is that in Western Christianity, we've been subjected to the kind of Greek Roman, systematic. In fact, we have systematic theology, right? Which tends to divide different, concepts as opposed to holistic theology, which says it's all one. And in our Western minds, we tend to divide, wait clear back to St. Augustine, the physical and the spiritual. Physical is bad, spiritual is good. We've got this dualism, this duality, but we don't see that in the Bible. We see very physical. The trees of the field will clap their hands. We, and even words that we use that are kind of spiritual, like a word like glory. We don't use the word glory very much, except in church. But the Bible uses the glory of the stars, the glory of kings, the glory of civilizations, the glory of old men as their gray hair. I mean, it doesn't. The biblical mind does not have this real bifurcated view of the world. And so what I wanted to do was to offer a very practical discussion to the faith community as to our responsibilities in God's creation and stewardship. Does he care? Does it matter whether we return? Does it matter if because of our life he gets more soil or less soil? Does it matter if he gets back clean rivers or polluted rivers? Does it matter if he gets back healthy people or a bunch of hospitals? That sort of thing. And those are big questions. But I think I don't purport to have all the answers. In the book several times I say, look, I don't have all the answers, but can we at least wrestle with it? I think God is honored when we wrestle with what does this mean to me? As Francis Schaeffer used to say, how shall we then live? If this all be true, how shall we then live?
Yeah. And he really addresses that so thoroughly in Old Testament law.
Yes.
If it didn't matter to him, then he would not have gone so in depth into how to raise food. I mean, he's the originator of crop rotation, what to do with food, what to eat, what not to eat. If it didn't matter to him, then he would not have put all of that into Old Testament, both in dictates and in historical writings.
Yeah, I mean, when the Israelites went into the land of Canaan, remember, he gave them a specific prohibition: don't cut fruit trees. You can cut other trees, and build with them and use them for things, but don't cut the fruit trees when you go in. And so that is throughout, including the parables. Jesus spoke in parables using very physical things. The Psalm 23, the Good Shepherd. If you've ever been with sheep, how whatever sheep centric that is, and it just understanding that physical, spiritual, should we say, where they kind of meld together, it brings richness. Well, it brings richness to both.
It does. Well, and even the Passover meal, in the Passover meal, you're not seeing how animals were raised, but you're seeing the importance spiritually as well as physically of the animal world that God gave us. And of course, we have our event coming up, Nose to Tail Nutrition, which we'll talk about later. But we see constantly references to food and good food, things today that are demonized and that we're trying to so hard to educate people to bring these foods back. Like the Promised Land was described as a land flowing with milk and honey. So milk and honey, those must be some pretty good things. And you and I have talked
that wasn't pasteurized milk and pasteurized honey.
Right.
That was a raw thing. When David fled, when Absalom did his revolt,
Yeah.
and David fled from Absalom and went out to that elderly friend of his out there in the mountains. When you look at what they brought to eat, it's just a wonderful, 7 ingredient thing, figs and cheese and my mouth waters every time it wasn't Walmart. It wasn't red dye 29, a monosodium glutamate. It wasn't all of those things. And the purity, of the food that was there. Now, so then the question comes up, well, is it a sin to eat a Snickers bar? And I think right at the top, Maureen, I want everybody to know, I don't think it's a sin to ever eat a Snickers bar. There's some latitude, when you're in Rome, there's some, you don't want to be obnoxious. You want to be a good host. You want to be a good guest.
Right.
And you want to appreciate the context of where people are. And so while I don't think it's a sin to eat a Snickers bar, it probably is to eat 5 a day. This everything to excess. And so I kind of go by the 80-20 rule. It's okay to be religious and cultish about 80%, but the 20% part is so you can go and enjoy your niece's birthday cake without being a bore at the birthday party. There's that point too.
That is something, Joel, that I have always wrestled with as a mother, I can tell you. And there are things I've done to try to make it easier, like never send them to a birthday party hungry, that kind of thing. And Sally always used to talk about the 80-20 rule whenever she was teaching for the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I liked that thought, but there definitely are people, and I've had a couple of family members myself, including especially my husband, who can't do the 80-20. They really need to do like the 98.2% or something like that.
Mhm.
But if we're all concentrating on eating foods that God created for us and they're clean and non-toxic, raised properly, then most of us are fine with 80-20. But because so many are so screwed up.
Yeah, well, the problem is that if you came, let's say this, if your childhood from day one had been 80-20,
Yes.
you might not have the vulnerabilities that you have today. But when your first, 15, 20 years is 20-80 the other way, then you come into adulthood with all sorts of toxicity and fragility that you don't normally have otherwise.
Yeah.
But Maureen, it goes beyond that. Like, for example, the golden rule: do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. Right? I mean, that's the golden rule.
Mhm.
So my question is: does it matter then if a Tyson chicken house puts fecal particulate, ammoniated, nitrated dust particulate at 1,000 times normal in the air within a mile of a Tyson chicken house? What about the neighbors that live there? Okay, so the zoning department says, yes, you can build the chicken house on your farm, but then what about the downstream neighbors that can't have a chicken barbecue on the patio because it stinks, or the feedlot, or the hog facility that stinks, and
Yeah.
and,
Those are
and, get-
real problem.
and gives people asthma. So the question is what's on my menu? Is what's on my menu, is that consistent with what I say I believe in the pew? Do the pew and my menu add up? Or do they fit? And I think it's important to just maybe a story about this book might be good. It was published by Faith Words. It was published by Faith Words, and Faith Words has a list of 150 prominent pastors around the country. From Joel Osteen to others, plenty, but 150 of them that they send manuscripts to get cover blurbs. This book has the distinct privilege of being the only book Faith Words has ever published that has no blurb. Not a single pastor would blurb on it. And that just shows how, whatever, tension, how tough this message is. What does a pastor do when, at prayer meeting on Wednesday night, Mrs. Jones stands up and says, "Oh, I've got the greatest praise. Our daughter finally landed the greatest job in the world. She's going to be working in research at Monsanto. It's a high-paying job. It's a wonderful job. The Lord has answered our prayer. She's at Monsanto, and it's just wonderful." And then the lady walks into the pastor's study and sees this book sitting on the desk, flips through a little bit of it, says sees a couple things about modified organisms and Monsanto, and suddenly you've got a row in the church. And so, another one that I mentioned in here is, for example, does it matter to God whether we use styrofoam paper or just Salvation Army used dinnerware at the potluck and wash it so that there's no waste at all to go to the landfill?
Right.
I'm not saying that a styrofoam coffee cup is evil or sinful, but I am suggesting that I think God cares. Look, if God numbers the hairs of our head, and God knows when a sparrow falls, I mean a useless sparrow, right?
Yeah.
If God is concerned about that, surely he's concerned about how many bags we're putting in the dumpster behind the church to go to the landfill. He's concerned about the health and the nutrition of the parishioners who come to the potluck. He,
Yeah.
he's interested in the life of the animals that went into the Kentucky Fried Chicken or the pastured poultry casserole. I mean, he's interested in those things. And I don't want to make a cult, but can we at least wrestle? Can we at least have a discussion without suddenly being labeled a, greeny weeny earth muffin, gay creation, commie pinko?
And that's exactly where you're coming from years of being in the alternative health, in the sustainable ag world. The same thing that I had noticed for many years was that it was mostly people out there kind of in a different spiritual realm than Christianity. And they were embracing the green movement, the take care of the earth, stop filling landfills, be careful about how you raise your food and what you clean your house with. And then people like you and I who are Christians and we feel the same way, people in our churches tend to look at us and think that we're just nuts.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So you asked the question at the top of the podcast, how did we get here? How how did we get, I mean, we being in the faith community, I'm just using
Yeah.
the faith community to try to be as broad as possible. How did we in the faith community miss this? I'll just say miss this. And
Yeah.
and I think it's because the early environmental stewardship earth care movement was dominated by creation worshipers, not creator worshipers.
Yes.
We,
That's key.
we steward creation because we worship the creator and it's his stuff and he's entrusted it to our care. No more than you would borrow something from a friend and return it blemished and torn up and messed up. By the same token, God has entrusted to humanity the caretaking of the cream of his creative capacity. I mean, all you got to do is look at microbes and animals and plants, and if that's not creative, I don't know what is. And and we have soiled it. Humanity has soiled it. We have done this to it. And isn't it just like Satan to want to blind the faith community and make it disregard or disrespect God's stuff, to make fun of people who care, and to be impoverished by being sick all the time, going to the doctor,
Yeah.
not being able to accomplish what God would like them to do because they're doped up on on junk. And
Yeah.
and so that's a that's a tough nut to crack, because there's no question but what the early adherents to just health food, to ecology, the early adherents to that, they're all kind of Bish, Shelley, and Keats, the English Romantic poets. They were basically pagans and animists. God is in the tree. No,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, God is everywhere, but the tree is not God.
Right.
So the faith community, we find that repugnant, right? No, but because we find that repugnant, it's easy to be broad brush and throw out the compost pile too, and throw out the kombucha, and and throw the whole thing out. And it's unfortunate that we've allowed ourselves to get co-opted that way. What if the faith community was the one who when people talked about who really cares about clean water, who really cares about growing soil, who really cares about immune function, wouldn't it be cool if the faith community carried that banner?
Be fabulous.
If anybody on the street said, yeah, it's those people who worship Christ. They're the ones who care about soil. They're the ones who care about, water. They're the ones who care about health. But instead, what we have is, I was up speaking at the University of Guelph in Ontario. The guy before me, he holds up a Bible. He holds it up aloft, like this. And he does a 5-minute tirade on you students at the University of Guelph. They had about 300 students in there in the amphitheater. He said, you got to understand that every gully, every ditch, every infertile frog, every pesticide that, he went on for 5 minutes is because of this book. And he's, actually I can grab mine, it's because of this book. Right. And he's holding the Bible aloft. And that's the mentality. And so
Wow.
we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do, to rectify that, that persona within the world.
Wow.
If we could hold that high road, it would be pretty cool.
Well, unfortunately, what he was saying is largely true. And I've heard it and seen it through all of my years of adulthood and living as a Christian. For instance, someone who I respect very much several years ago had put something up on social media celebrating modern agriculture and how we're feeding so many people now around the world because we have modern agriculture. And he was embracing the chemicals and the genetic modification. And it goes actually so against the Bible. And he totally misunderstands all this that we're talking about. It should be us saying, God talked about this. God told us about this. And why exactly were all of those food laws so important to the Jews in the Old Testament times? There's one reason and one reason only. Well, okay, two. Purity would be one. The health of God's people. And now in modern times, we've totally lost that. People just don't see that God established everything as good, as perfect and wonderful, and we've so messed it up. And we're suffering. But to your point about people being sick, and Satan's really winning the war on that because people can't do what they could be doing for God's kingdom just because they're sick.
Yeah, well, there again, God, the Jewish people, they were an object lesson of God's provision as well.
Yes.
So the whole, he talks about you will not get these diseases. And I don't want to, we're now in the age of grace. We're in a different dispensation. I don't want somebody to, we raise pigs, right?
Yes.
So,
I'm
okay. And so I don't want to make this go beyond what it needs to be. But the point, I think the point of the Old Testament was that God's people in that time, it was the Israelites,
right.
God's people were to be an example where, he set up a welfare system where poor people would be taken care of. He set up a temple taxing system, a tithing system, a priesthood system, a food system. There are tons of laws about everything from fallow to sabbatical to when you can pick grapes to the fact that if your bull goes over and hurts a neighbor, you're responsible. And in fact, if the bull was known to have been pushy, your bull is an extension of your hand. Okay. And all of these, all the Levitical law was to be a light to the world, that there would be a people. I get chill bumps and even teary talking about that there would be a people on the planet that every other civilization, every other pagan, animistic, godless civilization could look at and say, wow, what's their secret? What's their secret? And we as believers, look, I don't think sickness is sin. I don't think that if I get sick, I've necessarily sinned by any means. There are some people that believe that, name it, claim it, sickness is sin. But in the general main, God's people should,
We should be the healthy ones that
yeah,
people are looking at, exactly as you're describing.
yeah, we should be the ones that aren't in as big a stew about, oh no, what do we do with mom when she gets old? We should be the, and we see examples. I mean, the Amish and the Mennonites, I think, do a good job of the communal part of this. And I mean, they've got their problems,
Yes,
but
they
on,
do.
but on that they do fairly well. And wouldn't it be neat if the faith community could embrace these basic communal food, relational, you know, not lending with interest, and all of these kinds of elements that actually create a people set on a hill. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really powerful and profound, attraction,
Yeah.
attraction to the world.
Yeah. And I'd really like to see us, however slowly, move in that direction. I want for us Christians to be the ones that are out there able to and doing good works, helping each other first and others, not so sick and hospitalized and on all kinds of medications. One of the things that really bothers me, Joel, about the food system today and how even Christians have just embraced the modern food system without question is what it does to our mental health and the health of our children. So, in particular, I saw this quite vividly when I was teaching part time and watching kids in the classroom who were either falling asleep, hyperactive, unable to focus, unable to learn, acting out. And this was a good Christian school, right? But when parents are okay with their kids eating chicken nuggets and drinking Mountain Dews and Dr. Peppers and then eating Sunburst candy, I don't remember what they're called, but they're coming in every day with these foods and these snacks. And then the answer is put them on medications.
Right.
Their brains aren't functioning properly. They need chemicals.
Yeah, listen, Maureen, we're supposed to be a peculiar people,
Yes.
a separate generation, which means that we don't just buy into the orthodoxy. We don't just do it because it's protocol. We don't get the vaccine just because everybody says we should. We don't, get Ritalin just because everybody thinks we should. We don't. We are to be beyond that. We're to think through that. Now, do I hate hospitals? No. Listen, if I have trauma, if I'm in a car wreck and I got a leg hanging on by a tendon, I want to go to the ER. Let me tell you,
Yep.
that there is absolutely a place for all of that. But this idea that I'm sick, oh, I must be short of some drug.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder which drug I'm short of and I got sick today. I mean, that's nuts, right? That's
It
nuts.
is. And
And
but it's true.
yeah, it's absolutely true. And so in the, in the church community, there are so many things that we could do to regain the high road. I mean, we could take these great big church lawns and we could turn them into community gardens. Think about that. Think about a church in a sector that had, a couple of acres. That's pretty common, good sized church in a community. And we're going to quit mowing the lawn and we're going to turn that into gardens. Who doesn't have a spot for a garden? Come and have, I mean, it could be an entire focal point for, for true communion. Not something we do in the quiet in the sector, off by ourselves, and bring folks in. And of course, in the book, I tell the thing about imagine a youth group, that instead of going to King's Dominion or Busch Gardens, instead they say, okay, youth, we're all going to go. I'm going to give you all Maddox. We're going to go out to Farmer John's farm, and we're going to spend the day chopping thistles and multiflora rose, and we're going to learn about sin when brambles, sprang up and now when we get together and have a Bible study, we can talk about, hey, remember that great big thistle and how you had to look at it, you had to analyze it. Where's its weak spot? Where can I attack that thing? And that if that represents sin, well, we need to look at sin the same way. Where's its weak spot? How can I attack it? and I'm gonna just keep chopping until I get it out by the roots, and it's not gonna come back. And I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful, practical way to
Yeah.
to move our faith into a practical, visceral understanding, rather than just having it stuck in basically most people live their Christian lives in basically an academic focus group mentality.
Mhm.
We come together once a week, we sit around and we discuss, and okay, we did our cerebral investment in spirituality this week, and we'll stop for Happy Meals on the way home,
Yeah.
even though and we've just heard about the Right to Life rally. Listen, I learned this back, oh goodness, 20 years ago. I was struck several times as I was speaking, or I was trying to, kind of suss this out. And it dawned on me after numerous discussions, as you said, most of my whatever, speaking career has been with tree huggers. And
Right.
and in fact, many of them say, how can you even read the Bible? I mean, don't you realize that thing is all about destroying everything? And and I said, well,
There's a bunch of stories that somebody
yeah.
made up, and yeah.
Yeah. And of course they've heard preachers get up and talk about, we're in dominion, we got to take over. Yeah, cut everything, and it doesn't matter. It's all going to burn anyway. God doesn't care about it. No. And it struck me many years ago that when the faith community, we look at somebody who's willing to tie themselves to a tree so it doesn't get cut, or save the or lie down to save the baby whales, risk
Yeah.
risk of drowning in the Arctic to save the baby whales. And those same people have no problem ripping babies from the womb in abortion. We look at that, and it's unspeakable to us. We don't understand how you can be so for life over here and not for life. It it doesn't compute. All right. We must understand, Maureen, that for us to go march at a Right to Life rally and then stop at McDonald's on the way home is just as hypocritical, And they look at us and say, but you mean you're caring about the unborn, but all these chickens and cows, and you don't care at all what happens to them. You don't care at all what they're doing.
Right.
They're just as dumbfounded by that as we are. And I think that until we in the faith community appreciate that.
Yeah. And I want you're starting to go there anyway. I want to go there because we can sit here and talk about all that's wrong. We need to talk about how to make changes. And one thing that you've already talked about is, instead of mowing the lawn, put in a garden. And that's actually something that I brought up at my own church. And I was teaching a nutrition class and a gardening class and a food class. And we were trying to establish a garden for the kids, but then COVID hit and everything shut down, and that never happened. Right. But every time that I drive up that drive several times a week, I see the expansive lawn that has to get mowed. Now, they do play soccer. There are various things, but there's a whole lot there. And I keep thinking, if we could just put up a fence, we could put some sheep out there. We could have a garden on one side. And how hard would it be to have chickens?
Yeah.
Well,
And another one, Maureen, why couldn't a church, I mean, generally, churches are, anywhere from 150 to 350 people. I mean, some of them are huge, right? I mean, there's mega churches too, but a lot of churches are 200 or above people.
Yes.
And just imagine if that group would say, you know what, let's adopt 5 farmers in the community. We meet here every week anyway, and we'll just part of meeting together is we all go home with our week's food, and we can we can order it all, and shoot, maybe some of the farmers would start attending there too, and we're all going there anyway, especially if there's farmers in the group, right? and we just adopt 5 of them. A couple of them do vegetables, a couple of them do animals, a couple of them do specialty fruits, maybe a couple of them do flour and baking, whatever. I mean, a, a 200 member church could easily support 5 to 8 full-time farmers, maybe
Yeah.
10 full, but certainly 5 to 8 full-time farmers. You know how many young farmers are out here struggling, trying to get 2 or 3 more customers so they can leave their town job, leave their town commute, especially now with the price of gasoline.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stay on their farms and take care of their things full time. How many people are looking for just a couple of new people? If a church group would organize around that nucleus, and especially now, Maureen, when food security is a big issue,
Yeah.
and people are sitting there in the pew, well, we got to pray for food on the shelves. Well, how about not praying for food on the shelves and putting feet to your prayers? Go find a farmer, and so the food is never on a shelf.
Yeah.
So it comes
That's
from the farm, to your shelf. And so imagine if the whole church faith community would suddenly embrace the short chain of custody, regional food thing. And I mean, it would blow the minds of the liberals, wouldn't it? It would blow
it
the
would.
minds, because suddenly they would look and say, wow, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing over there. And that's exactly what God wants. God doesn't want us to be sitting here haranguing. Yes, there is a place to harangue and warn of impending peril. Yes, there is. But there's also, he says, beautiful are the feet of those who bring the gospel. And so we should be attractive and beautiful where the world is ugly and unattractive.
Mhm.
And the things that the non-faith community worries about, we should figure out how to dispel those worries.
Mhm.
Here's how marriages work, so you're not worried about divorce. Here's how child rearing works, so you don't worry about a rebellious 16-year-olds. Here's how health works, so you don't worry about immune dysfunction.
Yeah.
That's where we're supposed to be, and that's how we become a light to the world. I mean,
Yeah.
the faith community right now. If I ask the average person who is a conservative churchgoer today, write me all the things that you're angry and frustrated about right now, it could be a pretty big list, But the whole goal here is to take all of that energy, that negative energy, and invert it and proactively innovate and create
Yeah.
so that we become hope and help when the society becomes hopeless and helpless.
Exactly. That's perfect. So I'm not surprised. So perfectly said by Joel. But yes, instead of whining and moaning and complaining, we need to turn it around and be proactive. Let's do something. And when it comes to health, nutrition, and food, of course, that starts with teaching. And that, of course, is what Aaron and I are actively trying to do. And my own church is thankfully very receptive. Now, 2 churches prior, we were absolutely lunatics,
Mhm.
just lunatic. But what we were doing years ago on our farmstead stuck with several people. And I'm hearing from a young woman in Kentucky now who grew up coming to my household frequently, learning about the food that God gave us and how it should be handled and produced. And she's doing that now with her young family. And it's so exciting to me. I'm sure because you're all over the place. When you see that, it has to be
Oh,
so encouraging.
it is. It's. I mean, we have a homestead tsunami going on right now,
We
and,
do.
and it's really there, and it's just wonderful, and people are, there are more and more people waking up to this,
Mhm.
but it's, boy, man, is it slow. It's a hard slog. Prince Charles always says that a society is known by its architecture, religion, and food. And American food has never gotten when you travel anywhere in the world and you say American food, what's the first thing you think about? Everybody who I've ever asked that to around the world says McDonald's.
Yeah.
And so that's our food culture. And I would suggest, the Bible talks a lot, Maureen, about true religion and pseudo religion, or uh the true gospel and the counterfeit. I mean, Satan is a liar and the father of lies, right?
Right.
So everything has a counterfeit. The church has a counterfeit. A good marriage has a counterfeit. Good education has a counterfeit. Counterfeit education.
Yeah.
And we see that throughout. And it's absolutely correct that there is a proper stewardship pathway, and there's a counterfeit stewardship that has glitzy bright lights and and LED lights, and we're going to feed the world with vertical farms without any soil. We're going to IV chemicals, and we can feed the world. It sounds so glitzy, and it's back to, like, Paul saying, they're going to bring to themselves, preachers, people with itching ears, right? Who tell people what they want to hear. And listen, Maureen, what people want to hear is that we can feed the world and we can be healthy, and we don't have to participate. We don't have to think about it. It can all be convenient, and we can spend our day on Netflix and at the soccer game, and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab at World Economic Forum, and beyond Impossible Burger, whatever, and, Procter and Gamble, Tyson, they're going to take care of us. Tyson says, on their truck, feeding you like family. What? That's a wonderful moniker. Feeding you like family. Yeah, it's junk, and it makes the neighbors sick with the fecal particulate. It makes the water sick. It gives us MRSA and C. diff and superbugs from antibiotic resistance. You can go down the line. There's this counterfeit. There's this counterfeit.
Yeah.
And what we want is to present an option for truthful. What is authentic? The counterfeit is the opposite of authentic. So we want authentic food. And when fortunately we didn't have Frito-Lay and Monsanto in biblical days. So the Bible doesn't specifically say don't eat GMOs. It doesn't specifically say don't eat factory farmed meat or use ammonium nitrate for fertilizer. It doesn't specifically say that. So we have to look principially beyond explicit and look at implicit instruction, and
that's very important. Yeah, that's really where my head always goes when I'm teaching about nutrition and food and health generally. I oftentimes point out that God gave us everything we needed. He created everything perfectly in 6 days, but he didn't give us factory farms. He didn't give us factories, period. He gave us food. He gave us plants, animals, water, air, everything we needed, and the methodology to utilize it. But I also oftentimes think with modern agriculture and modern medicine, and especially that V word, I also think about how God didn't give us those things. God gave us everything perfectly. Men, just like in the time of the Tower of Babel, men are so full of themselves, so prideful and arrogant that they think they can do better than God, that they think God left something out. So we need to change what God designed and make it better. And I just think that it's total hogwash.
Yeah.
And a slap in God's face.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that we don't use technology. It doesn't mean that we don't use a computer. We don't use those kinds of things. But what it does mean, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because when people say, well, how did you come up with these clever, ecological, whatever, templates and procedures at your farm? I said, we just looked at nature and say, well, how does nature work?
Exactly.
And so for example, whatever, 30 years ago, well, goodness, 40 years ago, when the world's cattle experts told us to grind up dead cows and feed them back to cows, I looked around the world and said, where do herbivores eat carrion?
Yeah.
You know, and that I didn't see it anywhere. They don't eat carrion in nature. And now, I didn't know what would happen if you did, but I said, somehow this seems to violate a pattern here.
Yeah.
There's a zebra never eats a dead zebra. They don't. They walk the hyenas and the jackals and the buzzards get it. And so it was enough for me to walk away from that expert, innovation, that counterfeit, to say, well, I don't see the pattern in nature. Well, then, what happened 20 years later, we had bovine spongiform encephalopathy, known as mad cow. And, I don't want to get into the debate. Was it actually eating that, prions? And I mean, there's a whole, I'm just saying the orthodox understanding right now is that it came from cows eating dead cows.
Yeah.
And so, I had no clue that that's what would happen, 25 years prior. But 25 years down the road, that's exactly what happened. And so, you got to be really careful about wading into the complexity and the magnificence and the mystical majesty of life, like a bunch of swashbuckling sailor pirates, and claiming it and saying, this is mine. I can do whatever I want to. And my dad used to say, we're so creative as humans. I mean, we are made in God's image, so we're really creative.
Yeah.
We're so creative. We can invent things that we can't spiritually, morally, or physically metabolize. So we invent something, we think it's really clever, and then we either overdo it. Am I glad antibiotics were invented? Yes, I am. But that doesn't mean you give it to every chicken on the planet. It doesn't mean you give it to every cow on the planet. But
or even every human.
Yes. Yeah. And so we humans, we tend to take every blessing and turn it into some sort of liability by our own hubris.
Yeah.
Instead of just appreciating the blessing and going on within the confines of authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of all things in moderation.
Yeah.
And recognizing nature and recognizing, I know you and I agree that recognizing that nature isn't to be worshiped, but we worship the creator who gave us nature, and understand that all things work when we stay within that structure that he created and gave to us. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, so everything that we do on our farm is about trying to see, well, a chicken is a bird. So how do birds live? Do they live in factories? Well, no, they move around. They eat some grass. They eat some bugs. Pigs. I mean, and that's where that's why I came up with this title. Here it is. The Pigness of Pigs. This book is not about pigs. It's about respecting and honoring the pigness of the pigs, creating a habitat that allows them to fully express their God-given physiological and phenotypical distinctives. All right. And that affirmation of the pig and the pig's needs, desires, unique talents, gifts, and abilities, that is the bones, the most basic foundational ethical framework on how a society maintains the Tomness of Tom, the Maureeness of Maureen, the Aaronness of Aaron, right? That all is predicated on the fact that we have honored the pigness of the pig. And if a society can't honor the least of these, it's never going to honor the greatest of these.
Yeah. Good point. Very good point. And every creature on the planet has a particular role, a God-given role. When we try to alter that, we screw up everything. So whether it's us or a pig or a plant or a bug, everything has a role, and we should be acknowledging, recognizing, and utilizing every. Now, I haven't figured out mosquitoes and ticks yet, but I said, maybe that's what we can look forward to.
That's part of I see that as all part of the fall. None of this, we don't know. I mean, at the beginning, the lion was laying down with the lamb, right? So there are certainly things. Deuteronomy 29:29 says the secret things belong unto the Lord, and there are secret things. We don't have to know everything. the problem is it's not what we don't know, it's what we know and don't do that's the problem.
Yeah.
And generally, what I've found for me and my experience, the thing that I least want to do is probably what I need the most.
And that makes it very difficult, doesn't
It
it?
makes it very difficult.
So we have to have the courage and the strength and lean on God to help us do those things which are most difficult.
Yeah. And we have to, and part of that, that's why we have the command to forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. God knew that when the faith community pilloried Hillary Clinton for saying it takes a village. I mean, the faith community pilloried her. Well, let me tell you what, I'd much rather live in a village than be a hermit out on a mountain trying to, eke out something in existence. Things do work better relationally and in a community. There is strength there. And so getting together to fellowship with others, to find out you're not the only knee that hasn't bowed to Baal, you're not the only, I only am left and they seek my life to take it away, kind of thing. Because it is lonely out here a lot of times. This
Yeah.
message, especially for Christians in the faith community. I mean, I wrote this, I don't know how many people have told me I'm the only one in my church group that gets this. And I have felt alone. I read this book and suddenly I realized, oh, finally there's somebody else out there. I mean, it's like they found something. And
It,
this is a shameless plug, Maureen. People who are hearing this message, there's nothing like getting together with others who share this value, this worldview, to be encouraged, inspired, and we need mountaintop experiences once in a while.
yeah, we do.
And I think this God's Good Table gathering here coming up is going to be a mountaintop experience for people. And it might just energize you for a year. It just might,
I hope
take
so.
you, take you and encourage you in your,
Well, that certainly is our vision. We really want to see a large group of people come together, learn, encourage one another, be encouraged, grow, and appreciate our Creator as well as and worship Him. That's what we're hoping. So, yeah. So people listening, come nose to tail nutrition. We've moved it to August 12th and 13th, and we're throwing in a bonus Sunday morning worship with preacher Joel. We're excited about that. We'll have singing, fellowship, praying, just a lot of encouragement and a message from you, Joel, which I always appreciate.
thank you.
So we're excited about that and really hope that people will value all of this that we're talking about enough to want to come and learn more. And we've got some great speakers. I'm really excited to hear Mike Dixon. Have you heard Mike speak before?
Yes.
Okay.
He's very good. Very good.
Yeah.
And I think you have pork rind.
Yes.
Pork
Yeah.
rind. Let me tell you what. If pork rind doesn't light your fire, your wood's wet. Let me tell you. I mean,
I'm so eager to hear him. I've been around him a fair amount, but
he is on fire. I mean, here's a guy that was headed to jail, inner city, ad situation, addictions, multiple addictions, all sorts of things. And boy, he met the Lord. They say he who's saved from much loves much.
yeah,
And he is on fire. He's only 20 years old. He's young, but and probably, is not as wise as he will be eventually. So he tends to be maybe a little brash sometimes and, get a little over his, but it's okay. Yeah, that's right. It's okay. Man, we, some of us old geezers, we need some brashness once in a while, right?
wake up, people.
Yeah, that's right. It's good. So yes, I guarantee that the speakers here will have you laughing, crying. It'll be a roller coaster of emotions as we just embrace each other and immerse in 2 days of seeking authentic truth in the stewardship and health space from a faith perspective.
So well put. Thank you. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank
Good.
you for putting in a big plug. And Aaron and I are just super excited and hoping to really reach people both for their physical health, but their spiritual health as well. So, hey, you've got a pond there. We may use that. That's on my mind, just so you know.
Yeah, we have a cow trough too,
Here you go.
Hilda Gore, we just had our 2 days of truth here last weekend with Dr. Sina McCullough and
And
at a gathering. It was wonderful. And, we did the cow trough challenge. Those who know me know that I drink out of the cow trough routinely, not when it's pond water, but when it's well water. I enjoy drinking out of the cow just to, increase my microbiome. And so, about half the people, drank out of the cow trough. And when the day was all over, Hilda stripped down. She had a swimsuit on underneath, and she went all the way under. I mean, took a bath in the cow trough, with all that. So, leave it to Hilda to, of course, she's small enough to get in there. You and I, Marie, we might have trouble getting in there, but Hilda could crumple up and she could get in there. But it was a wonderful, wonderful time. And we really look forward to a wonderful time coming up on this one as well.
Good. Well, on that note, I think we'll close out this episode of the God's Good Table podcast, but we look forward to seeing you. Check out our registration link at godsgoodtable.com. Early bird registration ends July 13th, so you'll want to hop on soon and get that taken care of. But we'll be back with more another time. And thank you. Thank you, Joel, very much. It's been delightful.
Thank you, Maureen.
Yeah. Today's episode of the God's Good Table podcast is brought to you by Simply Ghee. Simply Ghee is my go-to fat in my kitchen. I use it every single day for everything from frying eggs and sauteing vegetables to making cakes and cookies and things like that. It comes in the original formula and the A2A2 variety. Simply Ghee provides the delicious, intense butter flavor that we all love, but without any of the tummy-bothering lactose that is in just butter. It is made from the grass-fed butter of a herd of cattle in the pristine Pennsylvania Dutch country. So you know that it is safe, delicious, and full of good nutrition. Simply Ghee also now has a variety of spice mixes that you can mix into your ghee. This happens to be my favorite. It's the black garlic. I used this just yesterday on my cheeseburger and steamed vegetables. It's really, really good, and you can mix it in whatever concentration you desire, but about a teaspoon per cup is usually enough. It also comes in sriracha, heirloom salt and pepper, turmeric and black pepper, and maple cinnamon varieties. So with the ghee and the spices, you can mix it up and create flavor sensations in your kitchen for your family to enjoy. And while we're at it, we can kick it up another notch with Eat Pluck. Pluck seasoning is an organ-based seasoning from grass-fed clean New Zealand cattle. It's delicious, it's nutritious, and it removes that yuck factor when you're trying to introduce organ meats to your family with all of the benefits that they provide. So I encourage you to give Simply Ghee a try and their new spice mixes and Pluck as well. And if you use the promo code HEALTH, you'll receive 10% off your order at the Simply Ghee website. Thanks, relax, and enjoy the podcast.